Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to week number 3, lesson number 6 for The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Don't forget that you can go below to the link description and click the link inside of it, and that link will take you to the book online. I have a copy of it up right here. It's on Gutenberg.org, so all of you can be following along as long as you open up that other link. I know some of you guys are watching this on iPads and iPhones, and so you have to have the YouTube tab open the whole time. But you can also just follow along later. And what I mean by that is watch the video with me, listen to me do the reading, and then go back, open the tab in the video description, and click that link, and then don't watch, but read the part that you watched earlier. And once you read everything that I went through, and then also if there's extra reading for homework, you'll have completed what was required for that video. So no matter what, you can definitely try and make it work. I know some of you guys have gotten the book bought for you, and some others of you are waiting for a paper copy. Again, have your parents email me, please, so that I can work on getting the paper copies for those of you guys who need them. Anyway, last we left off, we were finishing chapter 3. We got just part way into it together, and then I assigned the rest of it for homework. Chapter 3 was a pretty crazy chapter. Finally, we had the two leader types, Buck and Spitz, really clash. Francois and Perrault were going back and forth over who would win. Perrault really believed that Spitz would win because he said that Spitz was like a devil, and Francois at one point said that Buck is like two devils, and that Buck would win. They fought a couple of times, Buck and Spitz, but never really seriously until one night they were all chasing a rabbit. Buck, Spitz, their other sled dogs, and a bunch of huskies from the wild. They were chasing this rabbit, and towards the end of the chase, Spitz gets the rabbit, and Buck decides this is the time. He attacks Spitz. He and Spitz go at it, and all the other dogs are watching. Spitz is a rough fighter. He's experienced. He really tears Buck up. But it says here, Buck possessed a quality that made for greatness. Right? Buck is great. He has imagination. So we can add this to our characterization of Buck. If you're making a character trait list, you would have patient, intelligent, caring, strong, deliberate, right? And then you can also add after this point imaginative, right? He has imagination. He fought by instinct. He could only fight by head as well. So he rushed and attacked, bit Spitz's leg, broke the bone, and then charged Spitz one last time, knocked him over, and we all know what happens when one of the dogs gets knocked over. So Spitz is no more. Buck won the fight, and it says at the end of the chapter here, Buck stood and looked on, the successful champion, the dominant, primordial beast who had made his kill and found it good. So he's now in the wild, right? Buck probably wouldn't have been able to do this a couple of months ago when he was back home in the South. Now that he's been engaging in wild antics, he's been finding his true primal self, his instinctual self, not the self that exists in society, but the self that exists freely in the wild without a lot of rules other than the rule of surviving. He finds it good that he killed Spitz because he no longer has this huge enemy to deal with, and on top of that, I'm willing to bet that Buck is going to find his way to the ranks of leadership, true leadership, now that Spitz isn't in the way. We'll see. So we're going to start right here at chapter 4. Go ahead and follow along if you can, and if you can't, feel free to click the link in the video description and follow along after the video is done. Chapter 4, he who has won to mastership. What I say? I speak true when I say that Buck two devils. This was Francois's speech the next morning when he discovered Spitz missing and Buck covered with wounds. He drew him to the fire by its light and pointed them out. That Spitz fight like hell, said Perrault as he surveyed the gaping rip and cuts. And that Buck fight like two hells, was Francois's answer. And now we make good time. No more Spitz, no more trouble, for sure. While Perrault packed the camp outfit and loaded the sled, the dog driver proceeded to harness the dogs. Buck trotted up to the place Spitz would have occupied as leader, but Francois, not noticing him, brought Solex to the coveted position. In his judgment, Solex was the best lead dog left. Buck sprang upon Solex in a fury, driving him back and standing in place. Hey, Francois cried, slapping his thighs gleefully. Look at that Buck. Him kill that Spitz, him think he take the job. Go away, Chook, he cried, but Buck refused to budge. So Francois recognizes that Buck wants to take the spot in the lead of the sled. And he thinks it's funny. He's like, you kill Spitz, you think you take the job? Get out of here, I think Solex is better. And Buck's not budging. He took Buck by the scruff of the neck, and though the dog growled threateningly, dragged him to one side and replaced Solex. The old dog did not like it, and showed plaintively that he was afraid of Buck. Francois was obdurate, but when turned his back again, Buck displaced Solex, who was not at all unwilling to go. Francois was getting angry now. Now by God, I fix you, he cried, coming back with a heavy club in his hand. Buck remembered the man in the red sweater and retreated slowly, nor did he attempt to charge in when Solex was once more brought forward. So Buck knows the law of the club. He knows his place. He is definitely testing his limits, right? Every step he gets, he's testing those limits, because that's what a great person does. That's what a great animal does. That's what a great leader does. Buck is displaying all those parts of characterization. He's really testing how far he can go, but he knows the sign of the club. He doesn't want anything to do with it. So he's allowing Solex to go to the front. But he circled just beyond the range of the club, snarling with bitterness and rage, and while he circled, he watched the club so as to dodge it if it was thrown by Francois, for he was to become wise in the way of clubs. The driver went about his work, and he called to Buck when he was ready to put him in his old place in front of Dave. Buck retreated 2 or 3 steps. Francois followed him up, whereupon he again retreated. After some time of this, Francois threw down the club, thinking that Buck feared a thrashing. But Buck was now in open revolt. He wanted not to escape a clubbing, but to have the leadership. It was his by right. He had earned it, and he would not be content with less. Perrault took a hand. Between them, they ran him for about the better part of an hour. They threw clubs at him. He dodged. They cursed him and his fathers and mothers before him and all his seed to come after, down to the remotest generation. And they cursed every hair on his body and drop of blood in his veins. And he answered curse with snarl and kept out of their reach. He did not try to run away, but retreated around and around the camp, advertising plainly that when his desire was met, he would come in and be good. Francois sat down and scratched his head. Perrault looked at his watch and swore. Time was flying, and they should have been on the trail an hour gone. Francois scratched his head again. He shook it and grinned sheepishly at the courier, who shrugged his shoulders in sign that they were beaten. Then Francois went up to where Solex stood and called to Buck. Buck laughed as dogs laughed, yet kept his distance. Francois unfastened Solex's traces and put him back in his old place. The team stood harnessed to the sled and in an unbroken line ready for the trail. There was no place for Buck save at the front. Once more Francois called, and once more Buck laughed and kept away. "Throw down the club," Perrault commanded. Francois complied, whereupon Buck trotted in, laughing triumphantly, and swung around into position at the head of the team. His traces were fastened, the sled broken out, and with both men running, they dashed out onto the river trail. So, Buck, again, proving his characterization, has really gotten what he desires as a leader and as a great animal. He said, I'm not coming back to the sled until you guys let me be leader. He's not running away. He's not in revolt where he wants to get rid of them. He wants to lead them, and he's making that known. He's very intelligent. He dodges the clubs. He plays a good game. He realizes he can't win this fight by going after them with his teeth, because that's not what he wants to do. He has to win this fight by persuading them, by showing them that he won't budge. A little bit stubborn, not always the best tactic as a leader, but we have to trust that Buck knows what he's doing as a leader and recognize that his decision is probably a great one, and the reason that in this particular case, he's now at the front of the line. Highly as the dog driver had forevalued Buck, with his 2 devils, he found, while the day was yet young, that he had undervalued. At a bound, Buck took up the duties of leadership, and where judgment was required and quick thinking and quick acting, he showed himself the superior even of Spitz, of whom Francois had never seen an equal. But it was in giving the law and making his mates live up to it that Buck excelled. Dave and Sol-Lex did not mind the change in leadership. It was none of their business. Their business was to toil and toil mightily in the traces. So long as that were not interfered with, they did not care what happened. Billy, the good-natured, could lead for all they cared, so long as he kept order. The rest of the team, however, had grown unruly during the last days of Spitz, and their surprise was great now that Buck proceeded to lick them into shape. Pike, who pulled at Buck's heels and who never put an ounce more of his weight against the breastband than he was compelled to do, was swiftly and repeatedly shaken for loafing, and ere the first day was done, he was pulling more than ever before in his life. The first night in camp, Joe, the sour one, was punished roundly, a thing that Spitz had never succeeded in doing. Buck simply smothered him by virtue of superior weight and cut him up until he ceased snapping and began to whine for mercy. The general tone of the team picked up immediately. It recovered its old-time solidarity, and once more the dogs leaped as one dog in the traces. At the rink rapids, 2 native huskies, Teak and Kuno, were added, and the celerity with which Buck broke them in took away Francois's breath. "Never such a dog as that Buck," he cried. "No, never. He worth $1,000, by God. What you say, Perot?" And Perot simply nodded. He was ahead of the record then, and gaining day by day. The trail was in excellent condition, well packed and hard, and there was no new fallen snow with which to contend. It was not too cold. The temperature dropped to 50 below zero and remained there the whole trip. The men rode and ran by turn, and the dogs were kept on the jump with but infrequent stoppages. Okay, cool. We're going to stop there for today. We've read a little bit into Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is only a couple more pages long, and so I'm going to have you guys finish it on your own. So please read the rest of Chapter 4 up to Chapter 5 for homework. And instead of writing a summary of the rest of Chapter 4, I want you guys to go back and choose one of a couple things to write for me, okay? Your first prompt that you can write about is again recharacterizing Buck. Now, I don't want you to take exactly the things that I've said and put them back into a paragraph. Don't parrot me. Instead, find things that you find interesting about Buck's situation or about Buck's actions or Buck's character and write them down into your paragraph, okay? So one paragraph that characterizes Buck. Is he a leader? Is he a follower? Is he strong, weak? Is he quick? Is he methodological? Is he clairvoyant? I don't know. What do you think about Buck and why? Okay? The second prompt that you can do is the conflict between Buck and Spitz. You can talk about why that conflict was resolved the way it was resolved. Was it a good resolution? The ending to Spitz's life? Would you have liked to see something different? If you think it was necessary, even though it was kind of sad, why was it necessary? What's important about that conflict? Not just in the specificity of those two animals, but in the broader idea of one leader facing another leader for dominance. What's the importance in one of those two leaders coming out on top versus having both of them constantly fighting? You can write about that as well. So go ahead and read to the end of Chapter 4, write about one of those things, and you can come on to my Zoom calls, the academic ones, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8:30 to 9 a.m., or you can pop into the social ones every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 2 to 2:30, and you could share it with me then as well. If you can't share it with me on Zoom, please send me an email with your homework. I appreciate all you guys that have been picking up more work these last few days, and definitely watching the YouTube videos, because that's going to get you entered into that drawing for a $25 gift card at the end of the week. So keep it all up. Thanks for staying tuned and watching along, and I will see you guys next time. See ya.